Welcome to Guitar Radio Show, the show dedicated to the guitar player, guitar maker, gear builder, and purveyors of such items that you may not know about, but should. Here's your host, Mark Davin.
All right, folks, welcome back to Guitar Radio Show. I got turned on to our next guest in 2005 after hearing a record called Heavy. And there's a track on there called Like Butter that changed me. I think it changed my DNA as a guitar player. I was hooked immediately. So early on when this show, the concept of this show was that it was going to be on Sirius Radio, and right as we were delivering it to Sirius, they were in the middle of their merger with XM, so it didn't happen. It looks like it may happen in the near future, but it didn't then. But in those early demos to Sirius, there were certain tracks like Butter that were on the demos to Sirius, along with another track called Mopey. That was a go-to track for us. So, folks, I wanna tell you to say that I'm actually a little nervous, and I never get nervous before interviews. I'm super excited to have with us Mr. Jim Campilongo. How are you, sir?
I'm really good. I'm really flattered. I'm nervous now too. And you picked. I love that track Like Butter, and it's not something I hear about a lot. I mean, when you said it was released in 2005. Gosh, I think it was my 4th record. I'm, plugging my 12th record.
Yeah.
And I am so proud of that track. It was about as close to, completely realized as any track I've done. And in no small part to the group, of course, and what Joe Goldmark on steel played on the bridge. Mm-hmm. He interpreted a melody I had for that. And, of course, he made it 3 times better. But the producer, Darren Roven, really got the most out of the group, and we had a couple rehearsals and honed in on the drums. I think we were going, it's giving the audience who hasn't heard this track the wrong impression, but kind of a John Bonham thing.
Yeah.
And the guitar sound was great, and it also, not to go on and on about it, but it was also a breakthrough for me because Darren insisted that I had nothing worked out. Because on the 2 earlier Cat records, a lot of the tunes I would work something out, not all of them, but some. because, we didn't have any time, and I was probably very conscious of the budget, and I didn't want to go there and not have it, and that was so scary to me. And, when the clock's running and people are watching and you got headphones on and maybe you don't love your sound and, fill in all the blanks. And that record, he was like, you're going to come in and you're just going to play and wing it. And I said, okay. And he knew me very well. He engineered the first couple records and I trusted him, and, it's like a director, when you're an actor and you trust the director to get the best out of you. And he really did. And I love that solo and that track. And it was really recorded from beginning to end, and it isn't perfection, but it works. It was successful. So I'm really, really pleased you picked that one. And Mopey, I didn't think anybody even knew that song. That's off a really obscure record, Live at the Nord. Mm-hmm. So thanks. You really, I'm impressed and flattered, of course.
Well, I'm like, from that moment on, I immediately went and got everything, all the back catalog, and just kind of immersed myself in it over the last 10 years or so. And early on, when I was planning this show, I was like, okay, this is one of the guys I want on this show. But I waited as long as I had. I mean, the show's been around now for 6 years in this form. And I waited this while so I would have a big enough audience to say, hey, check out this guy.
Well, thank you. That's really, really lovely.
Well, I did that with a handful of people that were really important to me sonically, and from a songwriting standpoint too. I mean, the incredible counterpoint that you do in a trio is really, really amazing and fascinating. And you're very, I think you're lucky and also pretty masterful in the way that you pick musicians to play with. That you enhance them, they enhance you. Sometimes in a guitar-based situation, it doesn't always work that way. It's usually the guitar player who's just way out in front, and there's not this lovely, folding of tone that's happening. With you, you seem to do that. Has that always been a conscious effort for you, or is it just kind of
I mean, it's, my bassist, Chris Morrissey, once said, and it was during, we were filming this video, and that was, it's on YouTube called Campilongo After Dark. It was this little series Rockwood Music Hall was kind enough to produce, and I really learned from it. And one of the things Chris said, yeah, Jim, he goes, he just trusts us. It's like if somebody just gave you his car keys. And
that's great.
And I remember I was sitting there. I think I was off camera, and I just smiled. I thought, well, what a great way to put it. I never thought of myself being that generous, but it's kind of how I think, I guess, and in part, it goes back to the Stone Age, when I was like taking a horse to work and playing at this restaurant named Gordon's in San Francisco right before I moved to New York. And it was this gig where I had done it as a quartet, and we were kind of in the corner, and kind of people didn't really pay any attention. And I really like that sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's part of living in a vibrant city, is having those kind of gigs where you can play and people don't really pay any attention and don't know who you are, and you can work on your craft. Mm-hmm. Some people might think of it as, the end of the line, or they'd be cynical about it. But it was one of those gigs where we could play, and the owner, Gordon, loved us, and, the food was great, and we'd play. But at one point, I couldn't get a fourth member, and I started doing it as a trio. And the first gig, we played maybe 3 hours. I mean, it was a long gig where you'd really get inside the music. and I was trying to play all this stuff and playing, oh boy, here, this is C major 7 to D minor 7 to, E flat diminished 7. Okay, boy, I don't hear that. I better try and play it. And I did it again the following week because we played there almost every week. And I learned after, like, into the second hour, the less I play, the better it sounds. And the more I relax and listen, the better it sounds. Mm-hmm. And so, from that, I not shortly after that, I moved to New York and was lucky enough to meet Dan Reeser and Tim Lunsell, and they helped define kind of what I do. I mean, maybe not to the point of, like, let's say Santana and his first early records, those guys like Mike Shreve and Greg Raleigh and all those guys really defined the Santana sound, and then he ran with the ball. I don't know if it's to that degree, but they certainly were important. And from that point on, I really thought, like, okay, if I'm going to play less, like, what's going on when I'm not playing? So, that's part of my goal, is whoever I play with is something that's, legitimate when I'm not playing. And, it's not the kind of band, I don't play the kind of music that's just, hey, bassist, play doom, 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 doom. It's a little more than that. So, and I've been really lucky. And especially, not especially, because everyone I've worked with has been like a gift from God, really. But Josh and Chris, we've been playing together 5 years, and I'm still excited to see those guys. If we get a road trip gig, we're happy because we can talk and catch up. It's like, still feels like puppy love. And that's really nice. So, and I'm glad you noticed, because those guys are great, and so it's been, really all my bands. I've been very lucky that way.
Yeah, and what's also cool, I noticed too, is so you can watch a lot of YouTube with you guys, and you guys are very physical as well. I don't know if you even realize it. You ever go back and watch these videos? You guys are really physical. The three of you are so physical, and you're so lost in the moment, that's what it's all about. You guys contort in all these ways, and it's wonderful.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I was watching about 6 months ago. I had the sound off on, and somehow in the thread, how YouTube goes from one to the other.
Yeah.
Like, one of my videos came up, even though I wasn't planning on watching myself that particular morning, and the sound was off for some reason. And I looked up and I saw us, and I thought, we look like marionettes on a string, like, and not to mention Josh Dion. The drummer, who's so animated. And what's great about those guys is every now and then we rehearse, and we just do it here in my New York apartment. And Josh at the most brings a snare. Chris will play through one of my Fender amps. It's very low volume. And I look up, and those guys look exactly like they did when we played at Rockwood Music Hall or opening for Wilco, whatever it was. Like, it's just how they are,
Right.
So, but it's true. Yeah, it is kind of a physical band in a sense.
Yeah. So you were talking earlier about, you grew up in San Francisco area, right? And I'm a firm believer that geography has a lot to do with, the DNA of the player and how they become who they are. But when you left San Francisco, you said you came to New York. I'm an ex-New Yorker myself, born and bred. And I was curious to know, when you came to New York, did the vibe of the city influence what you were going? Because New York is an animal; it's a beast. And did it affect you in a way that inspired your songwriting?
I've been like biting my lip for 20 seconds to yell out absolutely. It absolutely infected my music. The city and also the players. I mean, there's so many reasons for it. I'll try and hone it down, but one is that there's nothing like, if anybody really wants to be alone, come to New York City. You can really be alone here. It's like being in a Grand Central or something. Like you can really be alone sometimes in the most crowded places.
Yeah, it's true.
And when I moved here, I just felt like an amoeba, in a bloodstream. And it was hard for me because in San Francisco, it's a little city. I was known. These are kind of really not the reasons. There's just a general vibe here. But for example, if I went to a guitar store, it was my bros, and I could say, hey, I got a gig on Friday. Can you get my amp fixed? And like all that went away here. And you're just like a silent amoeba walking through the subway steps and be on the right side and fall in line. And, there's this anonymous thing that happens. So when you play, it's kind of like a moment to be alive. And it's also difficult. Like, I love the city and I don't want to paint it's difficult and it's wonderful, all at the same time. You hate it and love it at the same time sometimes. And, but it was, I don't know, like it was like somebody lifted off a veil when I played. And people were looking at me and noticing me, and I so felt that. And not to say like gigs in San Francisco weren't special or anything like that, but it's like a totally different thing here. And, it kind of makes you deliver and be a little, I think you just play a little more intense. It's like being mute for a week or two and then speaking for the first time, and so I know that affected the music, and I know playing with Dan and Tim and just the guys I played with, like it was so serious, but yet it wasn't cynical. I remember, and again, I'm not dissing San Francisco because I have friends there like Mark Baum and, just great musicians that I learned so much from that are beautiful people. But sometimes, like, I felt like sometimes there'd be a misery contest a little, like, hey, I'm playing like this really stupid wedding on Wednesday. And, well, man, I'm playing like a even more stupid wedding on Wednesday, And when I got here, it was like people really you're here to play. And I never felt that cynicism. I just felt like a gratitude that, okay, I trudged through the snow, my feet are wet, I carried my amp, or I carried my snare and cymbals. Here I am not taking this for granted.
Right.
And and I learned from that too. You aren't pulling up in your truck and unloading, your two Fender Twins. It's like it's a little harder here. So it made me appreciate whatever I was doing, and I was kind of cut out of that cloth anyway because I mentioned that restaurant gig at Gordon's. I always look at most playing situations as an opportunity to work on my craft, whether it's in front of a lot of people who might have some expectation or people that are just more concerned with Sunday brunch. And I don't do that anymore. It feels like those gigs have vanished a little, or maybe I don't know. I don't do that as much. And sometimes I wish I was. But yeah, my music really changed when I got here.
Yeah, I always liken New York to wherever you played and whoever you played to. It was like the entire city had its arms folded and it said, "Okay, show me." And because of that, it would really strengthen your resolve, and you'd be like, "Oh yeah, okay, here I come." I'm going,
Yeah, I've noticed. When I got here, I just appreciated that the audiences got it, and they got it on a high level way.
Yeah,
And I really appreciated that. But I have to say, last year, which isn't that far away, it was in October, a couple months back, we played Chicago, Minneapolis, and Nashville. And everyone loved us, I mean, not to sound full of myself, but in particularly Nashville was like, gosh, it was like one of the greatest gigs of my life. It was the first time I went there as myself, and it was just like the audience was so generous, and there was a couple tunes I thought, I've played this better, and it was like a big roar at the end,
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to work for that a little more here in New York. I started noticing it when we came back, because there'd be a couple times where I'd think, wow, that was fantastic, and it would be like, the one guy applauding, two people checking their cell phones, and so there is an aspect of like overstimulation here, that sometimes people can take something for granted, and you have to work harder to get their attention. And I agree with that. But the upside for me was that people got the music, and they still do. And I was a little pigeonholed, and possibly because I was still a younger artist who had less music out. But when I played San Francisco, I remember I made this record called Table for One. It was my third CD, and it was a bit of a departure from the first two. And people were still calling it country. And it was so not country. I mean, just no way. And it was like, I don't know. I just didn't know what people were hearing. I can't tell you right now what they were hearing or what they thought. But here, it's like no matter what I do, I feel like the audience kind of gets it. And that's really the upside that New York audiences, I mean, I'm not saying, I don't want to insult other cities, but, the New York audiences are pretty smart audiences, and that's the upside.
Yeah, and there's some extra gratification once when you've won over one of those types of audiences. It's a whole nother level of gratification. It really is.
Yeah, you're right. And, the other thing is every city has its, I can't think of the word, but exaggerated aspect of itself. And, for example, in LA, and this is a bad example, but just to make a point, like maybe like rockabilly, where guys dress up like in the same suits as the 50s, is maybe an LA thing. And I say that with all due respect, because I know some of those guys and they're fantastic, but that ain't happening in New York.
No.
Like that just doesn't fly here. But what will, almost to a fault, is like guys like, detuning their guitars and putting on capos and hitting them with a hammer, or something like real out music happens here. I think more than almost any place I've been. Like that does fly here to a certain degree, and I'm kind of use a really lousy example, but it's helped me. Like, and so I'll rope this in. I just don't want to like say like like weird performance art goes over here, but it allows me to do a lot of things that get accepted. And if it was a college town that was bar centric, my music would be different. You'd have to compete with that audience. You'd have to compete with the drinking. You'd have to compete and deliver the expectation. We're here, if I chose to do a backwards loop on my boomerang and play over a drone, people would check it out, because that's an aspect to New York. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's the music is a centerpiece. It's not the it's not the sports bar mentality. It's where people are there for the drinks and the hot wings. It's that the music is the centerpiece.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it in 15 words instead of my 100. But and I really appreciate that too. Even though being that gig in Nashville, I still want to go back. I loved Nashville and the scene there, and I knew so many people. Every city has its strengths. And in LA, you can rehearse and you can prepare for a gig. Things that kind of go on the fly here a little bit, I think. But anyway.
Yeah. No, and Nashville is going through a new renaissance, too. They're really, it's becoming, people are saying it's becoming the next Austin in the sense that it's really opening up its mind to anything that's possible. And that's kind of cool, especially considering the way country music is right now. It's not really country music. To me, it's 80s hair metal mixed with hip hop, and
I know there's good country music out there.
Oh yeah.
I just last year I produced with Luca Benedetti. I co-produced with my friend and fellow guitarist who plays on the Honeyfinger record, and co-produced that. A record here by this guy Zephaniah Ora, and it's a really good sounding country record. And because he'd send me sometimes like, oh, I got a good review, and it would be on this blog or and who was dedicated to the kind of country music probably both of us like. At least myself, I really love like 60s country music with a pedal steel guitar.
Yes.
Good vocals that aren't too regional, sounding with topics that all men and women could relate to.
And Dale Watson is a great example.
So it's out there, but usually, if we turned on America's Got Talent or something like that, and I actually haven't seen that show, but you know what I mean, a Star Search type of things. It's usually like, it makes me feel like a snob. But, it's not the kind of music that, it seems corrupted.
Well, it's
sometimes.
Sometimes
it's the show.
I just think
maybe it's great.
I think sometimes it's just backwards. It's just, that whole, you gotta sing for your supper mentality is no longer there. So I think once again, like we were saying off air, there's that lack of authenticity. When there is no suffering in the music, in the art. There's a lot to be said. I used to love playing the clubs because I was like, oh wow, this room. You get into a certain room and you'd be like, wow, I can feel the beer, the blood, and the piss in this room, and it just lent to the experience. That's just
and sometimes I'll see an artist. For example, there's a guy I really admire around town named Gray McMurray, who's a guitarist, and when I see him, I just feel like I see his insides. And sometimes I'll see, let's call this artist Joe. I'll see this guy Joe, and I'll think, well, that was really good, but where's Joe?
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be about pain or, I'm miserable, I want you to feel it too. It's just like, well, where's your quirkiness? And, there's certain aspects that, are hiding behind proficiency and a learned vocabulary.
Right.
And that's what I love about Gray. The guy's great. He's a legitimate guitarist, but it's like sometimes I almost feel uncomfortable, and that I relish.
Well, think about it though. Like you said earlier, those folks that are doing the Star Search, America's Got Talent type thing, if they were getting, if their shoes were getting wet from carrying their amp, they were walking in the snow, through the streets of New York, and they're carrying their amp and they're carrying their gear, and and they couldn't get a cab, they probably wouldn't do it.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I agree with your point, but I also think like Nels Cline is, can be a rock star in the band Wilco. And I saw those guys last year. And so they're kind of rock stars, right? I mean, at least to me. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, talk about delivering. I mean, I wanted at one point, and I rarely feel this way, I wanted to like rip up my chair and throw it during one of his solos. It was so magnificent and violent and real. And, they're catered and they have a tour bus, but nonetheless, boy, talk about, it being real. So I guess, I don't know, it's complicated. I guess file it under its
I think they're real because they were that band. Yeah, granted, they've got craft services now and a nice bus, but they were there, and that's the whole thing, is about holding on to your core value. You hold on to your core value all the way through, and you're always going to resonate with your base. It's just I think that's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be, we digress if we thought of artists that didn't do that.
Oh, yeah, I can think of plenty of those, but
Yeah, there might be.
Yeah.
I could think of one or two that popped into my head, yeah. But we should use our time for...
Yes, positivity. Positivity.
And we're saying a name like Gray McMurray that probably a lot of your audience hasn't heard,
Right.
But, I see your point. I agree.
Yeah. So you've got a new record. It's called Live at Rockwood Music Hall in New York. And this was recorded a lot of shows. And
way too many.
So how in the heck did you go ahead and decide, okay, I'm gonna narrow it down to these tracks? How did you do that? That's got to be so difficult.
I hired my staff while I ate craft services. Well, Rockwood was kind enough to record almost every show over a 2-year period. And, we completely would forget that the tape, was rolling.
That's the best.
And we'd do the gig, and every now and then the sound person would give me an envelope of thumb drives, and I'd throw that thumb drives in a bigger envelope here at home. And at one point, I knew when I made the Jim Campilongo Last Night This Morning record that I was going to follow that up with a live record, because it was so different. Because the Last Night This Morning is a record I'm really proud of, but it's very different in that it's not a trio. There's a guitarist and a steel guitarist and some nice piano and acoustic guitar with Roy Williams and Johnny Lamb, Luca Benedetti. And there's a couple songs on there. I think one in particular, it's my favorite. It's kind of the Like Butter off that record. And it's called, to me, it's different than that, but it's like one I thought, wow, we got it. And it's called Lola, My Baby's Coming Home. And anyway, we did that record. And meanwhile, I felt like Jekyll and Hyde, because on Mondays, we're at Rockwood playing kind of a free rock, if you will, like freeform rock, it almost sounds like to me. And I knew I was going to make that record, but I kept putting off listening to it. And talk about a job, so every morning for, I don't know, a month, I'd go through at least 1 to 2 shows. And when I found something I thought was keeper, they were all like one long recording. I'd separate the tracks. You have to label them so you could find it again. Label the thumb drive. I mean, it was really arduous. And at the end of it, I had a bunch of contenders, and then within that group, I would eliminate the repeats. I mean, in some ways, I could have made a record called, 14 different versions of Jim's Blues. I swear there were so many Jim's Blues that I liked. I ended up just asking the bass player, Chris, which, the one he liked the most, I went with, because I kind of like a lot of them. But I'd have, then those similar tracks would compete with each other. And a couple of times I had two versions. Then I went down to the bunker where I recorded last night, this morning, the Zephaniah record, and worked with Aaron Nevezi, who's a great engineer. And we went through the stuff, and a couple of them had like, wow, we really aren't getting any snare here, because it was so, they did, the Rockwood staff did a great job, but every once in a while there'd be like, oh, there was a bass hum that night. We didn't hear it, but under the microscope of this studio, we hear it. And so a couple tracks got eliminated, or versions. And at the end of it, I made a record called Live at Rockwood, and hopefully it's the cream of the crop, over a period of 2 years. There was one track that is literal. There's a vocal track that Josh Dion sings, and that was recorded, I believe, as a one track with one mic. And I like that version so much that we just went with it. And it sounds pretty good. I mean, it sounds really good. And, Greg Calby mastered it, and Greg remastered Sgt. Pepper's. I mean, he's a great master. He's famous. And so he cleaned the stuff up quite well. And then there was another track with Nels Cline that's 10 minutes long. I really like that. That would have never happened in the studio.
Yeah.
And so there was a couple things that I thought, this is really special. And almost every track I don't think could have happened in the studio. As long as we've been doing this, you go in and there's some kind of recording going on, and it might be noontime, and there's no audience, and sometimes you kind of lean on craftsmanship a little bit more, and in this case it's just kind of wild abandon a lot, or experimentation, and really walking the tightrope and getting, and balancing on one toe, and thinking, well, if I fall, it's fine, and so that's why I wanted to release it as well. It's a real good snapshot of what we're up to.
Well, yeah, it's a killer record, I gotta say, and it's interesting. I understand the whole idea of, with a live record, it's great because you feed off the audience, they feed off of you. It's sort of this loop, this feedback loop that takes place, so it creates this other type of energy. However, I noticed that, you guys are so precise and play so well together that there are times when you listen to this record that you go, well, this could definitely be this could be a studio track. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, it really makes me happy to, hear you say that, because, I'm so self-critical and think I could have done things better, or I think, I repeated myself a couple of times on that solo just to kind of expand on an idea that I liked, where I think, is that redundant? Question mark, for example, on Jim's Blues, the one we picked, I had a blown speaker, but I kind of like it. I like the sound. It was like the sweet spot of the blown speaker. The following week, or when the next time I played it, it really didn't sound good. But that night I was thinking, wow, this really sounds gritty. It sounds good. Like, what's up? Like, is there a power fluctuation here in the building? Like, I was thinking like those things. And then I realized I had a blown speaker. Now, so to me, a lot of it sounds raw to the point of where, I don't want to say embarrassed, but it took some bravery to put that out, because it wasn't every hair in place. And I'm glad you think it sounds really proficient. And I can't deny that Chris and Josh and I have played together at least once a week for 5 years.
Wow.
And then toured, and then, we have gigs in between. And, we're a pretty well-oiled machine.
Yeah, so there's telepathy there too.
There is, and we got some of it. I mean, on that Cock and Bull story with Nels Cline, we changed keys twice in unison. I mean, I hear it and I think, wow, how did we do that? So there is a nice gliding aspect to the music. That I hope everybody enjoys.
That is a killer track, I have to say. There are two tracks on this record that have never been released before, and Sal's Waltz and There You Are. And I wanted to talk about There You Are. Once again, that's one of those tracks. When I heard it, I was like, "Wow, this could have been done in the studio." Had I not heard the audience before and after the track, I would have not. I could have potentially not known. That's how it is. But what's also great about this song, it is absolutely a beautiful melody. And is this an old track or an old?
No,
tune?
It's a new song, and I'm just for fear of sounding like overly earnest, I just got like chills. I was so happy you brought that tune up because first off, that was the first time Nels ever played it, and it was at a show where Nels once in a while comes up and joins us, and we hadn't even decided what he was going to play. But I remember one of the reasons it was good is we had played like 4 super duper loud tunes before it, and I remember thinking, "Gosh, I'm really up for a change of pace." Not out of desperation, but it was music to my ears to play something pretty. And that song is a new song. It was actually, sometimes I have a folder of song titles. Like I'll think of a title sometimes and think, hey, that's a good one. I'll put it there. And if I write a tune, I'll see if it fits. And but that song was a song I wrote for my fiance, expressing kind of how I felt one day. It wasn't necessarily like, hey, this is for you, come listen to this, but it was just I felt a certain way and wanted to express that, even just to myself, and we hadn't played it that much. I think we played it once or twice before that, and then on the Nels night, I thought, it'll be great to hear the chords, because it goes to F, it's in D, but it goes to F sharp 7 to B minor. I mean, it's no great, it's not a, giant steps or anything, but there's some chord changes, and it really worked, and I really appreciate that you like it, because it takes some patience, I think, to let it develop. It doesn't really hit you over the head like some of those tunes on that record.
Yeah, I think the idea with a song like that, and oh God, there's another tune I want to mention too. Songs like that and songs like, the title track of Heaven is Creepy. I think those are tracks that you have to acquiesce to. You have to let them wash over you, and then when you do, you go, oh, okay. That's in there. It kind of seeps in, and it's like, wow. After you were done with it, when I heard it the first time, and the band finished, and I heard the crowd, I was just like, wow, that was profound. It was really just it's such a beautiful song. It really is, which makes me want to ask you about songwriting in general. I want to say, I'm so glad you asked me about songwriting, but, at the end of There You Are, there's this really wonderful pause where the audience waits to cheer. Yeah.
But one of the things that pops into my head, and I don't want to ruin it, is one guy, I don't know where he was, I think he was like 4 inches from the microphone, just went, at the end, and it was so loud, and it ruined the take. I mean, it was like it kind of undermined what had happened, and we spent so much time trying to edit that guy out. It was bleeding into every mic, and if you really listen closely, you could hear him. And we actually created a track that was spaced and everything else. It was really difficult, and I'm glad it passed the audition, because you didn't say, "Hey, I really like that track, but what about that guy?"
No, and even that. I mean, I that's so funny, because when you are at a live show and somebody who may be a little more greased at the moment, and they kind of do that. At the same time, you got to say, well, you know what? Somehow he was reached. So
he was definitely reached. I don't know who the guy is, but I ought to charge him an hour of studio time. Anyway, you were going to ask me about songwriting.
Yeah, so about songwriting, if we go back and look at, and it is a complete departure record for you in many respects. Last night, This Morning record. It's I was writing notes about it. It's like a modernized trip through the past, but with an Art Deco vibe. So
that's really nice.
When you write, is it for you? Is it how does it start? Is it in your head first, or does it come to you when you're playing?
Well, I wish I could answer something interesting or concrete. I usually, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I usually just sing over some chords that might inspire me. And sometimes I tape that over a specific progression. For example, Lola, My Baby's Coming Home, I did that. But I don't know, it happens so many different ways. I think that there's a tune called Little Song, and I wrote that after hearing Gray McMurray one night, and it's so not like Gray McMurray. I listen to that tune and think, how is that a reply to what I heard? But usually it's some kind of emotional exorcism, not to sound like Joe Art, but when I write a tune, and it's rare, and sometimes I usually try and write songs pretty fast. But sometimes if they take me a few days, I think, well, what's the truth here? Where does it want to go? I'm not in a big hurry to go to the 6 minor, or, I think, where does this song want to go? And that's always kind of scary, because sometimes if you overthink a tune, you ruin it. It's like, whoops, I overthought it and I lost it. Which, is one of the reasons why I like things that just happen quickly. And as far as it not sounding, like, oh, here's our retro album, I kind of can't even explain that, other than I think that, we have a jazz mentality somewhat, where we want it to sound like now, like the now moment. So if somebody plays a line, I'll answer that line at the beginning of my solo, for example. That's like an obvious thing. But there's no trying to restructure a certain era, like, okay, I brought my, Gibson Les Paul amp and blah, blah, blah. I just play what I play, and everybody else plays what they play, and we interpret whatever the song is and what it may give us. And I think it's really just based on, a righteous goal of, like, making the music good and hopefully beautiful, and I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it definitely does. The singing part, the singing over the chords totally makes sense. That's you're creating a loose structure and something to build on. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And a lot of times I go back and copy what I sing, because a lot of times it isn't natural for me to play the melody in the way I sing it. And there was a tune off a Dream Dictionary that I wrote called The Past is Looking Brighter and Brighter.
Yes.
And it's kind of the same thing over and over. It's just ba-da-ba-da, repeat again and on a different note. And if I wouldn't have sung that, I would have never, I would have think, this isn't a song, and yet when I heard it, and not to flatter myself at all, but I thought, this, I was kind of trying to write an aria a little bit, and because I sang it and I copied the phrasing of my vocals, it helped push the tune. And it also brings to mind something a friend of mine, who just passed away, who I so miss, a great musician and great guy named Tim Lensel, was in my first trio, and he had to get a sub once, and the bassist who was subbing was kind of couldn't really grasp what his role should be in the group, which Tim had nailed. And Tim just said, "Oh man, it's just like Jim's the singer, but he doesn't sing." and in a way, that's kind of what it is. A lot of the songs, there is a vocal melody, like Butter. Not to beat a dead horse, but a lot of the songs are based on a vocal line.
That is absolutely true. I mean, I think that's really why I'm so smitten with your work, in that it's always great when you can walk away and hum or sing in your, even if it's just in your head, the melody of that particular tune of whatever it was. And in instrumental music, that's really kind of what you hope for, same like with Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck's one of those players that he creates earworms. You do that. You create earworms in people.
Well, thanks. And, a lot of guitar records don't do that.
No, they don't.
And I don't want to sound high and mighty, but yeah, it's and I don't listen to them, but Jeff Beck, gosh, talk about a guy who just keeps getting better and better.
It's just ridiculous.
I saw a YouTube clip, and I think it was a few years old, and he was playing Sleepwalk, and it was incredible. Me, as a man in his 50s who's been playing guitar for 35 years or whatever, 40 years, whatever I've been playing, I said out loud, and I was by myself, I just said, "Gosh, I'll never be that good." And it's he's still that good. I felt that way in high school. But now if I hear some of the guys, not all of them, but some of the guys I liked in high school, I think, he doesn't really play over the changes. Let's say Eric Clapton or somebody like that.
Right.
And I love Eric Clapton, and I love Cream, and in some ways my record sounds like Cream, and he's one of my guitar heroes. That said, Clapton doesn't play the major third, and I'll have a sense of listening back to Cream live when he was a 25-year-old man, and now I'm a guy who's been playing 40 years, and I'll think, I didn't really nail the change there. It's kind of a pentatonic. But with Jeff Beck, I'm just still in awe of him.
Yeah, well, see, and that's the difference between Clapton and Beck. With Clapton has been, and continues to be on a Buddy Guy, Freddie King trip. That's his thing, and that's who he channels and how he channels. I always felt that his most original and exciting work was with Cream. But Beck is always pushing the envelope. He's always saying, "No, I don't want it to sound like a guitar. I want it to sound like a buzzsaw." Or I want it to sound like birds, or, sort of and same thing with people like Adrian Belew. Adrian Belew is a good example of that too. It's you never know what's going to come out of that guy.
Yeah, that's a guy I kind of, with all due respect, kind of forgot about, and I've seen him live a couple of times. Was it the Bears, the name of that group he had, or anyway? Yeah. It was really fantastic.
Yeah, he's a trip.
He was very innovative and very vocal, and Beck too. I mean, if Beck sounds like a great feminine voice a lot of the times. And the way he uses the vibrato bar and his fingers, you hear the flesh on the strings. It's really amazing, I can't say I have like his latest record, whatever that is, but it makes me want to get it. Just to support the guy.
Yeah, for sure.
And you read interviews and you're like, yeah, do you practice? No, I work on cars. And I always want, you know what I mean? I think, is that true? Because you just keep getting better.
Yeah, I that might be the secret to his success, in that he only really plays when it's time for him to get out and do anything live or create new material. And that might be it, actually. It might be that ability. He might be one of those people that, that distance creates a newfound love and a newfound freedom in his creativity. That could be it.
Right, and a different perspective.
Yeah.
But, I read somewhere he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but pretty closely, he said he doesn't practice because he doesn't want to peak too soon. And I swear I read that, I think in 1984, and I mean, maybe he's right, but that said, like I personally need to practice.
Same here.
I feel like even if I learn like something that's completely unrelated, I mean, generally I practice things I don't really play in a lot of ways. But if I learn something new, whether it's a little piece on the classical guitar, I feel like I bring that to the next gig I have.
Oh, yeah.
And if I'm not practicing, I feel like I'm not bringing anything. It's weird. But, I don't know. Jeff Beck's obviously got a bunch of spoonfuls of talent from birth, Yeah. I mean, maybe some of us mere mortals have to work harder.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he's an alien. So we were talking earlier about, you were saying actually earlier when we were talking about last night and this morning in the songwriting process about phrasing. I noticed that a lot of times, depending on the track, you phrase a lot like a horn player. So there's that breath element in when you play. Not many players really do that. Is this kind of a conscious thing? Do you realize that? Is it osmosis after listening to Miles for so long, or?
I think maybe. I don't like that whole diarrhea of the notes thing.
Yeah.
To really put it negatively. I mean, unless it's, and like Alan Holdsworth, who I think is utterly fantastic, and sometimes I don't think like he's imitating a human voice, obviously. I really like one of his older records, Tony Williams' New Lifetime, Believe It. And so sometimes I do like that, but personally, I've listened to a lot of Ben Webster, and obviously Miles, and just, I really like space. I think to some degree, I hold my breath when I am playing, and then I breathe when I'm not. And so, for better or worse, I wouldn't teach that to anybody. But I think it is tied in with my own physicality.
Yeah.
And I also feel like it helps me say something, because that's basically what we're all trying to do. And, and yet, like, again, to go back to Cream, I mean, I listen to Spoonful probably once a year and still marvel at it.
Oh, yeah. I
don't think Clapton really stops. And I think in some ways that created a school that, by the third or fourth or fifth or 10th interpretation of some playing like that, where the first person does it really successfully, maybe the 12th person not so successfully.
That's cool. So let's see, where do I go from here? I've got so much stuff. What was the first record? What was the first record you ever? What was the first record you ever bought? Was it Smash Hits?
Yeah, Jimi Hendrix smash hits. You know that. I told somebody a couple of years ago, and they didn't believe me. They said I was trying to be cool, but it's the truth. Yeah, Jimi Hendrix smash hits. I really liked Red House.
Yeah.
And the first vinyl I ever bought, I bought singles, and that was Revolution by the Beatles with that that kind of double stop intro, and it's the slower version, and boy, that used to just make the hair raise on the back of my head, you know. But the first LP I ever bought was Jimi Hendrix smash hits with the poster with them on the horses inside, if you remember that. Yeah, that's the first record I bought.
That's pretty trippy. So I know that you have a column in GP, and I read it. And how big is your collection now, your vinyl collection? It must be gigantic.
Well, you know, it's I don't know. I think it's maybe 2,000 LPs, and most of them, you know, are keepers. Like, I'll say that. Like, it's there's not too much fat, you know, in the collection. You know, I don't think I have like Eagles' greatest hits or whatever, you know, stuff like you can kind of, you know, not to put that down. I mean, some days I want to hear that. I mean, the other day I was like, I wish I had a Journey record with Steve Perry, you know. I really like those guys. You know? I have one Journey record, but it's their first record when they were an instrumental band. Yeah, that was a good band. I used to see them all the time.
Yeah, that's cool. Oh, really?
Yeah, back in the day, we used to go like every time. I love them, and I love Neil Schon, and you know, they'd play Kohoutek, and it would be, you know, it was like great rock guitar, you know.
Right. So that was with Steve Smith, right? Steve Smith, Greg Raleigh.
No, that was pre Steve Smith. It was Hensley Dunbar.
Oh, wow.
And they had a rhythm guitarist named, and I hope I'm getting his name right, George Tickner. So, and it was Neil, you know, who was probably still a kid. And, you know, I was a kid, you know, I was probably, 16 years old. And we used to go see them and just think, wow, you know, I used to love them. But that's the only Journey record I have. But most of the records I have, you know, I have like a big pedal steel collection, and you know, the country music we were talking about. I have a lot of instrumental country music,
like Jimmy Bryant, Speedy West stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff, and so I have about 2,000 LPs.
Cool, and so basically with that, with your column, you just dip in there and pick out an oddball and. Because you've turned me on to stuff through that column that I didn't know about.
Really?
Oh, yeah, hell yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you remember
anything? God, I'd have to look in my iTunes. So what I would do is I'd read it, and I'd be like, oh, that's cool. Let me jump on that and pull it up. And I can't remember exactly now. There was one.
I'm really glad, you know, because it's, I mean, a couple of times, like, I just, you know, I did Clean Wheels of Fire, you know, and I thought, boy, you know, I even prefaced it with, you know, like an apology for that's what I was covering. But I just, there's one aspect of the column I have to adhere to, and that's that it influenced me. So I can't completely play DJ honestly, you know, you know, and but it's funny how many records did that. There's like a real weirdo, I don't know if it's out yet, and now the name's completely escaping me. He's a banjo player, and I want to say Eddie Peabody. That's it. Eddie Peabody plays the banjoline is coming up, and that's really obscure.
That's cool.
It was a record that influenced me. He's like, he invented this electric banjo with a vibrato bar, and you know, I think I got the record for like 25 cents and listened to it for, you know, 5 months. And it started my neck bending thing. And so it has to be done in that context. You know, I couldn't honestly, I'm trying to think of an example, but like Nirvana's, you know, a Nirvana record that I really like, you know, I couldn't necessarily say, okay, this really change the way I play. I mean, maybe the Sex Pistols, you know, but maybe not them. I kind of try to be honest. I just don't make it up.
Right.
But I'm glad you enjoy the column, and it's really fun to write.
I think
it's really easy.
I think it was, Bill Doggett's guitar player, Billy Butler.
That's
it.
I forget that column, actually. I don't even remember writing that one.
I think that's the one.
It's probably Everybody Loves to Honky Tonk. And it's confusing because it's Bill Doggett.
Right.
But his guitarists are Bill Butler and Bill Jennings.
Right.
And that's a great record. Yeah, that's the one. A friend of mine got the cassette stuck in his car for a year.
That's the one.
Yeah. That's a true story. And he told me after a year, I'm still not sick of it. That's a great record.
Well, we got to talk about gear because it's,
Sure.
Couldn't do this show unless we talk about gear. I would get eviscerated by the audience if I didn't. So, in the last couple of years, you've been working with Han guitars to create your signature model. How'd that all come about?
Well, it happened. I met Shiho out on Ludlow Street in the Lower East Side one night, and he came up and said, "Hey, I make guitars, and I want you to check this guitar out." And he opened the case, and it was this really beautiful looking guitar. And the next day, I played it on, I think it was the David Letterman show. And with Martha Wainwright, and it kind of started there, and I played that guitar the rest of the tour, and we talked about making a signature guitar, but I had just made the Fender, custom shop Campilongo guitar, and there was just 50 made.
Right.
But, that was still kind of new, and we talked about it, and this just at the end of this year, the time was right to release what we had collaborated on. And there was a long period where, I thought we'd make this like it's a boutique guitar, but like this really kind of expensive guitar, that was like, a Stradivarius, but new, and then I think it was my idea, I said, why don't we make a guitar for $800 and call it the Model C, like the Model T? And Chio was really into it, but then after about a month, he said, it is, virtually impossible. I will go out of business if I make a guitar for $800, and like I will be working for negative money, and he was nice about it, but that's basically the gist of it. And so we ended up coming up with a Telly that's $1,495 with a gig bag and free shipping in the U.S. Sorry if I sound like a commercial, or I sound like Escoban. I love that. I love that guy. If you remember, have you ever seen his?
Oh yeah, I love his hat. Love his hat.
Yeah, he'll play like an A minor, and he's like euphorically playing.
Yes,
like. He literally does House of the Rising Sun, and it's like the most earnest version of House of the Rising Sun you ever hear. But for fear of sounding like Escoban, we are really proud of it. It's a great guitar. I've been playing it. I'm going to bring it to my 55 bar gig tonight, which is about as good as an endorsement as I can give. And we're selling them, and people are buying them, and I think it's a great guitar, and it's at a great price, which I really wanted to do. I just really wanted to look people in the eye and say, yeah, buy this, and I feel that and then some, and so does Gio. We were talking this morning about how delighted we are about it. Sure, $1,495 doesn't grow on trees, but considering what it is, I think it's a great deal, and it's a great guitar.
Well, once again, we go back to that. It's a callback to authenticity, right? I mean, I have a good friend from Colorado, a great guitar player, Adam Lopez. He's a great country rockabilly player, and he plays on Telecaster. I don't know if it's your model, but he plays it, and he's had it for quite a while. And the thing is road tested, and it's got all its dings, it's got all its battle scars, and it just keeps coming back for more. So that says really a lot about the guy who builds the guitar, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he's made great guitars, long before, like, we collaborated. And as I said, I had that Han, and I played the rest of a tour with it. And, I had to be, like, really on it every night. I mean, it was, Martha was, I toured with Martha for a year, and at the end of the year I liked and respected her more than in the beginning, and that was a lot. She was great, and so it was a good working situation. But that said, I used an effects board. I had to recreate the record. It wasn't like, just be Jim and do your thing. It was like a totally opposite of that. She even told me when she hired me, she's called me up and goes, Jim, you can't be you. And I was like, well, I'll give it a try, and learn the record. But I was using backwards loops and an effects board and all kinds of stuff. And the guitar, had to function, in front of, let's say, a couple thousand people, almost every night. Right. And I used, a guitar Chio gave me, basically. And so, I think it's the kind of guitar that's going to get better with age, which is what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you're into top loading with your guitars, and you state that it creates a warmer kind of a vibe. And I'm at odds with that a little bit, only because I've always heard in the guitars that I played that were top loads, they were always kind of a little shinier. Maybe it was the electronics or the way it was set up, but walk me through that.
Well, like most things, and for me, it just started with some naivete. I was looking for a Telecaster, I don't know, we're going back 20 years at least. And, I had one and I liked it, but I wasn't nuts about the neck. Like, it felt a little hard to play. And this student I was giving lessons to every week was a guitar collector. And he brought over that 59 one day. And I mean, this never really happens to me, but I just completely fell in love with it, and it felt like it was mine. And there was things I could do on it I couldn't have done the day before playing this guitar. And particularly, like, in the middle of the guitar, if I just maybe bore people, but like on strings 4 and 3, I always felt like a bit of clumsiness, and everything fell together on this guitar. And to make a long story short, and it is a long story, the guy ended up his name was John Jensen, gave it to me. And I know at the time it was a 59 Telecaster. It was, what do they call it? Refinished. And, it had new frets. It wasn't a total collector, but it was $2,000, back then. Now, I don't know what they cost. We can't afford them. Yeah. That's what we know.
Yeah, or sure.
If we could, we wouldn't spend the money on that. But anyway, which is still substantial. I mean, $2,000 was a lot of money, and he gave it to me. And about 6 months later, there is a point to this story. About 6 months later, I was playing it at a gig, and some guy came up and he goes, "Hey, wow, that's a top loader." And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, you're playing a top loader. And he goes, "Yeah, those are kind of dogs." And I said, "Oh," and he goes, "Yeah, the strings usually go through the back." And the guitar I had before, the strings did go through the back, but I didn't really think about it. I just, thought, "Oh yeah," I didn't think about it. And I just knew I loved this 59 top loader. So ever since then, I think they were considered more dogs back then than they are now. I mean, even I just got a Duo Sonic, which is like a 3/4 scale style guitar that was made for like, total low budge and like your first guitar. And the damn thing feels like a Stradivarius now. I mean, it's an incredible guitar made in 1959. And there's that aspect to all guitars, but I remember, they had a bad rap. So I've been asked about it a lot. And, to me, they just feel a little more slinky. I think the sound is a little more, like, pleasurable to my ear. I don't like that, glassy steel sound, glassy telly sound that, kind of punish the audience thing. And I feel like top loaders are just a little, softer and gentler in a way. I do all this behind the net bending stuff, and they feel a little looser to me. I mean, I could play both, but I think that, a string through or a top loader. But for that reason, I just prefer the top loaders. And, that's kind of the story behind that guitar.
That's cool. Yeah, that's the 59 is what you're using on the majority of your catalog, right?
Yeah. Once in a while, I'll play. I have a Strat, and if I did an overdub, I think there's some Strat on heavy, and if I did a record that was multi-tracked, which I think, even on Last Night This Morning, it was all 59. I mean, the thing plays in tune, it doesn't hum, I have a small guitar collection for sure, but just to keep everything ship shape, and that's amps too. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times, I don't know if you've experienced this, you go to a studio and they brag about how many amps they have, and it's like, wow, you have 30 vintage amps that really don't work well. Sometimes I feel like even the stuff I'm using, I have to spray, money through a fire hose at them, to keep the amp working and the tubes new and the speaker crisp. And same goes with the guitar, especially in New York with the weather changing. Oh, yeah. So generally, almost out of necessity, I use one or two guitars. But yeah, I've used the 59 almost on every record.
Yeah. Were you using Princeton's in San Francisco, or was that something that happened when you got to New York and you were like, I got to be as mobile as possible and bring as much power as I can?
Well, a kind of a combination of both. I used a Vibrolux for many, many years in San Francisco, and probably used the Vibrolux and something else. I used a Deluxe and a Vibrolux on the heavy record, and Vibrolux on the three records that preface that, Jim Campilongo and the 10-Gallon Cast, Jim Campilongo and Loose, and Table for One, was all Vibrolux. And right before I moved to New York, a friend of mine, Bill Finnegan, who does the Klon Centaur, told me that you should get a Princeton. I think you'll really like him. And a guy I idolize to this day named Bobby Black, who plays pedal steel guitar, and he plays on a Christmas record I made, sold me his, and it has a C10N in it, which is a little more robust than the regular speaker. Him being a pedal steel player, he needed it, and I started playing through that, and I loved it. And when I brought it to New York, it was for all the reasons you named. But I was playing the Knitting Factory every Wednesday, and we'd stick a mic on the amp, and it was like, it sounded like the roar of a god, going through the PA, and it sold me. Sometimes I do miss the headroom of the Vibrolux, and like how an E string feels, the low E, when you hit it. You kind of feel it in your toes a little bit more, but I think the Princeton has a really sweet sound, especially a really sweet recorded sound. And so I've been just primarily using those, and partially out of laziness too. I have, a Deluxe I really like. I really like the Deluxe reissue, the first one they made a few years back. when that's backline, I'm kind of like, great, and I get to really move some air, and I get to like control dynamics a little bit more effectively. Like when you're loud or low, it's a little more obvious through a bigger amp, but pound for pound, I mean, I just think the Princeton reverb, I use two mainly. Like one is a Silverface with a Celestion G10 in it that is all over the two records we talked about, the live record and Last Night This Morning. And then I have that, I still use that Bobby Black amp. I call it the Bobby Blackface. And that has the C10N in it. It's a little cleaner. I use that on the Willies, for example, and some other recordings. And I may use it tonight with the Hahn. I want to check out the Hahn through that amp. It's a little cleaner, and the Hahn Telecaster pickups have a little more output, and I want to see how that matches with that amplifier. But yeah, basically, I'm kind of known as like the Princeton guy, and I mean, I'm happy to be known for anything, other than, what maybe O.J. Simpson's known for, or something like that, aside from football. And, but yeah, sometimes I do want to bring the deluxe, and then I think, I don't want to bring it up the stairs at 2 a.m. Forget it.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
But they're great amps. They're great amps. They have everything you need. They have reverb, vibrato, intensity, and they're loud. Yeah. So what else do you need?
Yeah,
maybe a little bit more headroom.
You tend to you EQ different than most people. Your bass is usually about 10?
Yeah.
And where do you keep your treble at?
8. Sometimes 7, depending. And it's some kind of revelation or something. I mean, guitar. I remember amp repair guys would go, "What, are you crazy?" I said, no, I think it sounds better. And I've been, when I see comments sometimes on guitar, I'll get a Google alert, and it's like, Jim Campilongo puts his bass on 10, newsflash, and I think, well, it's just, I don't know, I like that, it just sounds fuller to me, and I think everyone should do it personally. If I play through a deluxe, I don't put the bass on 10, but it'll be high, and I always say, you never say, wow, I wish that Telecaster had more treble.
Yeah, no, you never say that.
You never say that.
No.
So, I mean, if I was playing an ES-175, I don't know. I mean, I have a Gibson 225, and I keep the bass on 10 on the Princeton. I love it. It sounds nice and full to me.
Wow,
So,
that's interesting.
And I don't blow, too many speakers. I mean, when I say too many, I mean maybe once a year I put in a new Celestion G10, but I just like how they sound brand new. To me,
when
they get really worn in, I kind of miss the brand newness of them. They're kind of perfect, like the first 4 months, and that's like playing them on 10 at least twice a week.
So that's interesting. What is it about the new one as far as clarity? What is it that you feel really does it for you?
Well, it's a little more clear. I mean, there's a really nice creaminess that happens when they get worn in. You get that kind of wall of sound. It sounds like a Gibson through a Marshall more. So, yeah. But I kind of miss the ring. When you hit a chord and you hear the pick going against different strings. Right. That's a little more obvious when the speaker's new. And the great news is those speakers sound great the day you put them in, to me. And I don't think they're expensive either. And again, I don't want to sound like Escoban. I get no royalties from this, but I've done when I recorded a record called Orange. My amp blew a speaker like 2 days before, and I was concerned. This is when I was new, with the Celestion G10, and I put in one, and it sounded great the first day. To this day, I think, I'm really happy. I did blow that speaker because I had a brand new Celestion G10. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying they sound bad after a year, but they get a little creamier, and I kind of tend to like them a little more where you could distinguish things a little better when I slam down a bar chord.
So you're more lean towards more the Celestian than the Jensens then?
Well, it depends. It depends what I want to sound like. The Celestial sound. I mean, if I have a quote unquote jazzy gig, I'll use the Celestian because it's a little more. It's a little less bright. If I want more brightness and clarity, I'll use the Celestian the C10N speaker, which those things cost a fortune now. I did a Google search; they're like $300 or something like that. They're a lot, But I think those sound really nice, but not as overdriven. A little more clarity, and as I said, they still break up, but it isn't like Marshall-esque. So depending on what the situation calls for, but mostly I lean to the Celestian.
Cool. Interesting. Let me jump back around. I want to jump around your catalog just real quick, and then I know you got stuff to do. I want to let you go. I want to hold you all day, but there's a track on American Hips, and this is an album I don't think really gets a lot of attention, and it should, called Between Your Toes.
Oh, yeah.
This is another one of those songs that just kind of, whenever I was saying earlier, it kind of rolls over you. It's that seepage. It kind of just gets in there. It fills all the nooks and crannies in your soul. That's one of those tracks, Between Your Toes. Can you tell me about that session, if you can remember back that far?
Well, no one has mentioned that song to me in like the last 10 years. It's funny. But yeah, I really remember that session because I had moved to New York and I had a little bit of cushion. I forget. I'll just name it. I'll tell everybody my finances at the time. I think I had $8,000. And, New York City isn't,
go through
cheap
that
place
quick.
to live.
You burn through that quick.
You could spend $8,000 on a weekend and start taking cabs.
Hell yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, I think I could stretch that to 6 months. And anyway, so I came here, and I think it was 3 or 4 months, I recorded American Hips, and it was, I still had $8,000, I think. And so it was, there was a sense of urgency I cannot describe to you, like, financially and musically. Like, I was like, oh God, like, whatever happens, I have to release this, like, so it better be good. And we recorded it, I did with Dan Reeser and Tim Lunsell, and the day before I got food poisoning.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure, but I know my landlord was he had this poison powder. There was like mice, and he was like putting it all over the apartment, and I think I got it from that. But anyway, so we had 3 days booked, and I missed one day with with like food poisoning, basically, or just poisoned. I don't know. So we had 2 days to record the record, and it really came out well. Like, I don't know how, but it did, and we got a great sound. The other day I was vacuuming or something, and I had iTunes Shuffle on, and I heard this track, and I thought, wow, who is that? I like this. And I was like, is that Mark Ribot? And I turned off the vacuum cleaner, and I listened to it for another 5 seconds. I'm like, oh no, that's me. and it was Jim's Blues off the
yeah.
I haven't heard it in so long. I mean, forgive me if I sound full of myself, but I thought, wow, that was really good.
Yeah, no, I think that's marvelous when that can happen.
And that's the Bobby Blackface amp too. So, and Between Your Toes, I remember just Tim Lunsell really bringing that tune alive, and it's such a understated piece, sometimes even I need the approval of others, because I'll think, I did that with, there's a tune I wrote called Blues for Roy off Orange, and I know it's one of the more popular songs off that record. And I thought, I don't know, is this a tune? It's just a blues, And the bass player at the time, Richard Hammond, just said, "Hey, Jim, that's a good tune." And that was all I needed. I mean, I'm easily positively reinforced, I guess. But, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll keep playing it. And sometimes I don't like that about myself. Maybe there's a good tune and I should show some toughness. But if somebody said, "Man, that's not a very good tune," I probably would never play it again. But Tim was really supportive about Between Your Toes. And I think it's really vibey. And that whole record is, I mean, it's got the track American Hips. And the happy ending is, I think it was, I can't remember the name, like CGI or somebody like that. One of those big investment bankers that went out of business in 2008 used American Hips as on their commercial with Tommy Lee Jones.
Wow.
Doing the voiceover. And I didn't make millions, but I made I made some money, and it was like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. I forget the name, like CGI, something like that. Some big, and like not Merrill Lynch, but one of those.
Right.
And they went out of business in 2008. But this was before 2008. I forget. I think that was American Hips was released in 2002 or 3 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so, that record, and Norah Jones is on it doing Sweet Dreams. I cannot believe everybody basically almost worked for free. Tony Shear, we recorded Sweet Dreams at his studio. I don't think he charged me. It was, we're getting back to New York, I guess. Yeah. And the kind of support I got, and look, I wasn't the most talented person that I've just named. It wasn't like, here's people were, they recognized I was trying to be good and trying to do something of value, and they supported that. And that was another reason why American Hips was possible.
Yeah, so that's there goes that adage, and I'm a firm believer in that adage, is that you never be the best guy in the band because there's nowhere for you to go. So
that's so true. It's so true with Chris and Josh, too. I mean, some of my freer playing and everything, they're so supportive. There is never a dirty look in that band. Yeah. You could lose one and mess up the AABA form. Uh-huh. No dirty looks. It's okay. You're going for it. We support that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So another record that I want to talk about is Heaven is Creepy, which is another really great record. And there's, I listen to that record and I go, man, you could use most of the tracks on this record to put in a movie. Like Mr. and Mrs. Mouse, that is like movie soundtrack music. Menace, such a great track for a movie, and the title track, of course, is haunting as hell. What was that session like for you?
Well, I really appreciate that, and I forgot about Menace, and I love that song.
Crazy track. That track is insane.
I think it should be on a movie.
Yeah.
And that was recorded on I used a Vibro Champ on that track too, and it really sounds, big.
It's gigantic, yeah.
We Heaven is Creepy is such a solid record, and it has a monkey in a movie and the prettiest girl in New York. I think over the long run it became popular, but considering there's some hits on there, for lack of a better word, that I still play, I don't think it hit the guitar world by storm, nor did it get 1 million good reviews or anything. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a disappointment, but it was kind of went totally under the radar. But not every day, but people kind of talk about it to me, which makes me feel really good, like it hasn't died. But it wasn't the most fun record to make because we had recorded a record with a well-known producer, and it was very much like Heaven is Creepy. But we really couldn't. I did something kind of naive, and we just kind of assumed like business deals instead of talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And after we recorded, it was like the business deal wasn't really acceptable, which was kind of heartbreaking because this guy was really in our corner and really supportive, and I know he meant well, but I think in some ways, I don't know what year it was, let's say 2004 or 5, there were still remnants of big music industry and labels, and that kind of mentality. And, it really wasn't applicable anymore. And the agreement was, we just couldn't come to an agreement. And so we had to can the record. And then maybe 6 months later, I had some new tunes. I actually hadn't written Heaven is Creepy yet. Heaven is Creepy wasn't on the record that got canned, and there was a few songs on there. Maybe half the record wasn't on Heaven is Creepy, and I was kind of conscious of that because I didn't want to go re-record everything and then make this guy mad, because he had invested some money in the recording. It was real. It was a real political business situation. And so a couple of the tracks we had recorded, so it was like we had kind of been there, done that a little bit, but that said, it really helped us. It was like the record that got canned was like a pre-production exercise, and you could hear what you'd want to do differently and what you thought maybe could do better. And in a couple of cases, there was a tune on the canned record called Tony Mason that I named after a drummer here. That was amazing, and I couldn't release it. Really, so there was, it was like you'd never repeat it performance, and so when I made Heaven is Creepy, that was kind of hovering. That taste was still in my mouth a little bit, but it ended up being a really good record. And like a lot of records, I'm sure everyone who's listening who's made a record, a couple of years pass and you finally can hear what it is, and you end up liking it. I mean, I'm so uncomfortable after I make a record. I didn't feel that way after Last Night This Morning, funny enough. I really love that record. Like, I listened to it more than any record I've ever made. But most records, and probably because they're trio records and there's so much focus on me, I feel uncomfortable, where the Honey Fingers record was such a collaboration that, if I thought, I could have done my solo better, then Lucas starts playing and I think, God, that's magnificent. So, but that's the story of Heaven is Creepy.
It's a cool record. I really dig it. Another record that I want to talk about, I mean, honestly, I think we should do an episode where we actually just go through every single record. But Orange.
I'm enjoying this. I forget about some of these songs you're mentioning. So it's great.
So Orange, the Orange record, the track that opens up the record is called Backburner. It speaks to the little rocker boy inside me. I love that track. It's just, I want to break furniture when I hear that song.
Yeah, I gotta say, I that one, we really got it. And talk about like pushing a boulder uphill, and that was the toughest track on the record until it ended up being incredible. So I don't want to bore you or talk too long or whatever, but I'm happy to. Okay, we recorded so many basic tracks of that, and for some reason none of them sounded good. Like, we just couldn't find a good basic track. I mean, the band was great, but it just wasn't happening, or I'd make a mistake or something. It just, they didn't have it or it sounded flat. And we had recorded so many versions of it. It was like we tracked for 3 days, and every day we'd do like, we'd nail everything and then do like 3 versions of Backburner, And at the end of the 3 days, we had a couple weeks before overdubs, whatever overdubs we had, and we were like, we don't have Backburner. We never got it. And I don't know why, but I went through everything again, and I found this one track. It was like on day 1, take 2 or something, And I called the producer, Anton Fear, and I said, hey, I found a good basic track, but I'm really screwing up. Like I did, this one was totally my fault. And I go, do you think we can, we recorded basically live. I said, was there enough separation, like where I could just redo it? And he said, I'll check it out. So we went in and checked it out, and it ended up that you couldn't hear the guitar. So I could overdub it. Okay, so I went in and it was like, okay, today, we have to do 25 things. And the first thing is play great on Backburner. And I said, okay. And I went in and I was playing horribly. It went from okay to pretty good to bad to like, okay, I'm embarrassed. And Anton was getting really impatient, and that didn't help because we had 25 other things to do. And I was it's like a nightmare, right? Like you're just there and like you're just failing miserably. And so we just skipped it. Okay. And we went on and did the other 25 things. And, sorry the story is so long. So the third day we were going to mix, and I said, we never got Backburner. And he's like, yeah, well, we tried, and I said, well, let me try one more time. And there was this guitar there that was a thin line Telecaster that had like 11s on it that was sitting in the control room. And gosh, I credit the guy on the record, and Nicky, I can't remember his last name, but he's credited. And there was an amp there, and the engineer, the guy who owned the studio, and I can't remember his last name either, just because I'm, lame, but his name was Matt. I can't remember. He's a great guitarist too. He had this amp, and it was plugged into the amp that was in the control room. And I said, I'll just play this. Like, let me try and play Backburner one more time on this equipment. And I nailed it. And the amp was something like, I said, what is that amp? And I never saw it. Like, because I was in the control room, and the amp room was like 2 rooms away, right, in the studio. And I've never seen the amp. But I saw Matt. I go, hey, Matt. I go, and I don't know if this is true or I don't, audience, this may be a lie, okay? But I go, how much is that amp? It sounds fantastic. He goes, it's $50,000.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and I go, you're kidding? He goes, no, I made it myself. And he goes, Joe Satriani has one. And I said, well, whatever it is, it sounds fantastic. So that's the story of Backburner. And I'm telling you, it wasn't easy, but it just all worked out. And I got to say, like, that's, not everything on all my records is like what I think is like, like what the Beatles did on every track, and you don't know how they did it. Like, you got to rush through it. You got to take what you can, you got to compromise. But Backburner's like, wow, we nailed it. And I loved the sound, and it was a thin line with incredibly heavy strings through an amp. I can't tell you anything about it other than he told me it was $50,000.
That is hysterical. I can't believe that it wasn't your gear at all. That's amazing. I love that.
Not at all.
So here it is. It's like you got thrown into a situation that, you were in unknown territory, and the angst of trying to get this song done so many times. I guess that's when the universe just aligns. I guess that's incredible. That's great. What a great story.
I guess it is. I'm glad it was a long story, so I'm glad it's not boring. I mean, and to be honest, like, I love playing through stuff that isn't my 59 through a Princeton. I mean, every time I do, I'm like, wow, this is incredible. It's like, sometimes I feel like I'm eating the same thing every day, and all of a sudden, you're eating a hamburger, and you've been eating a tuna salad every day for 5 years, and this hamburger is like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. And I had that feeling when I played through that thin line Telecaster with like super heavy gauge strings, because I do a bend on the low E and I bend up a whole step, which is usually no problem. But I remember, and it's no problem on 10s, and it starts to be problematic on like an 11 set, and I could barely get it up a whole step, and yet the harmonic I hit like screams out because of the setup. So it really was great. It really worked out.
Super cool. But now that Live at Rockwood Music Hall is out for the world, for the naked steaming ears of the planet, what's next?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, right now I'm still kind of pushing the record, and involved with Chiho. We're talking kind of in theory about if we're going to make like a different kind of model than the Han Model C, but we're totally getting ahead of ourselves, because we feel like this is a year plan and we have to see how it goes.
Sure.
I want to go to Nashville again and hang out there for a couple weeks. That's on the agenda. I'm getting married this summer. I'm really looking forward to that. We seem, the trio, getting back to music, we've been playing Minneapolis, then Chicago, then Nashville, and we did really well in all cities. And we play in Detroit once a year, and I'm trying to string together a little tour, that'll be at least all those cities. But it's tough. Like if I got an Indianapolis date, that would be great. But there's like one club I know of in Indianapolis, and they haven't returned my email. But I'm trying to string another tour together. We're still playing Rockwood. I'm considering not doing it every week and doing it every other week. And at some point, I am thinking about making another record, and I'm writing for it. I'm not sure what that record's gonna be. Part of me might want to do a record. I mean, I don't know if I should say this because then I won't do it. It'll seem like, what was he thinking? But of like some standards, and maybe with my band, of course, Josh Dion and Chris Morrissey, maybe with Nels Cline. I also would like to do a duet record with Luca Benedetti. I really wish I could make 3 records a year, but I've been messing around, with Round Midnight for about 4 years, and I'm finally starting to get it. And I do In a Sentimental Mood, and I've been doing Light Blue, which is by Thelonious Monk. And I'm thinking, well, it'd be interesting to do a record of standards, but played, kind of Kelly-esque. Something a little different, or solo guitar, something, that, I mean, this will be my 13th record, and, there's a few things I can do. I'm certainly not Lenny Breau or Charlie Hunter, but, that might, be different, and an aspect of my musicianship that, maybe isn't as heard and will scare me a little bit. Like, sure, it's scary to go out and play Around Midnight after you hear Wes Montgomery do it, but hopefully my take on it will be valid and challenging. So, that's kind of what I'm thinking as far as this year. And if I'm forgetting anything, I can't think of it now.
Yeah. I love the idea of the duo record. That's really interesting.
Because me and Luca have been playing duo, and it's really taken a life of its own.
I believe it.
Yeah, we were kind of uptight the first part of the first gig.
Well, you're both so different. You're so different from each other, so I think.
Yeah, but it became really loose, like, and we kind of marveled at it. One song we did Autumn Leaves, right? And it just took this life of its own where, there was total interplay. I'm not saying it was like Jim Hall, Bill Evans, that record, but, it was in the spirit of that a little bit, where it was like interplay as well as support going on at the same time. Like, it was almost like no one was being lead. Mm-hmm. There was like two leads. And I would like to investigate that more. We have a gig next month, and it's a 3-set gig, so we can really get inside it. And I need to get a little better at it, but we're on to something good, that just isn't you play rhythm, I play lead, I play rhythm, you play lead. It's starting to turn into something special.
Cool. That sounds really intriguing. I'd like to hear that. That'd be cool. Very neat. Well, Jim, I could go on forever, man. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out to talk to me and all my listeners. This has been truly something, a dream realized for me to do this interview. It's really special for me, so thank you very much.
Oh, well, it was for me, too. I'm smiling, and, talking to you made my day. I just hope it wasn't, too long.
No, it's wonderful. This is exactly what we love. This is, you made my job a whole lot easier, too, I got to tell you. It's fun. I was talking to one of our blog writers the other day, and he's a great rock and punk guitar player. I love him. His name's Adam Hunt, good buddy of mine. And I was saying that I was going to do this interview, and he was like, "Oh, that's fantastic." I said, "Yeah." I says, "I really love the way he plays." I said, all of his records are sonic portraits, and I said, he's like the Picasso of the Telecaster. and my buddy Adam just said, he goes, "That's it. That's exactly who he is."
Wow. Well, tell Adam I said thank you, and you too. Well,
I want that to be a quote in the world that yes, Jim Campilongo is the Picasso of the Telecaster.
Well, I'll use that quote if it's okay.
Go right ahead.
That's really nice. Thank you.
Well, once again, thanks again, and keep in touch with us. Let us know when stuff's going on. We'd love to have you on again, and when you do whatever the next project is, come on here. We'll do a track by track, and we'll dissect the record.
That sounds great. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. You have a great rest of your Sunday, and I'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks a lot. You have a good day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Check out Guitar Radio Show on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, and Tumblr, and of course, on guitarradioshow.com.